Hello, and welcome to a very special year-end edition of the Casper Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Benzo, and today we're going to be taking a look back at 2023 and revisiting some of our favorite conversations from the show. As many of you know, the world of blockchain moves pretty fast, and over the past year, my co-host Matt Schaffner and myself have had the privilege of speaking with some of the very best minds in Web3 and within the Casper ecosystem. And since we started the Casper podcast back in January of this year, Matt and I have been absolutely blown away by the enthusiasm and support for the program. So just so you know, as we head into 2024, we are very excited to continue bringing you high-quality conversations, and we're thrilled to be a part of your Web3 journey. So that being said, let's listen in on a recent conversation we had with none other than Head of Research, Dr. Martin Eburg from Uphold. Martin, thanks so much for joining us on this podcast. And if you can give our listeners just a brief intro of who you are and how you got into the blockchain space.
My name is Martin Eburg. I am the head of research at Uphold, more like the institutional side of it, not so much retail. And I have the coolest job in the world. I get paid to think. My journey into, blockchain itself started way before Bitcoin. It's actually a coincidence. I had my first computer. I saw my first computer at school when I was like 17 years old. It was one of these Macintoshes, remember? These tiny boxes. Mm-hmm. And I found it fascinating. And then I went to university, bought my first computer, and I took courses, then computational mathematics, complexity theory. And a large part of that was distributed networks. So I was familiar with David Chaum, who actually started the first blockchain in 1987, right? Way before all this Bitcoin craze started. I then ended up becoming a diplomat, and I was put in charge of technology promotion in Asia. And in a capacity, I think in 2012, I gave the first talk about the potential of blockchain technology. There's a funny side story. The organizer forgot to give me a speaking fee. And I told him I'm a diplomat. I can't take a speaking fee, right? So he gave me a small envelope with a USB stick. And he said, there's a few Bitcoin on there, but you better sell them. This is not going to go anywhere.
Did you take his advice?
I never sold it, but I also lost the recovery keys.
Oh, wow. Have you ever tried to recover?
Nah, I completely lost the data. I moved houses like 3 or 4 times, and I didn't even pay attention that much for a while.
Hey, Martin, it's been a pleasure getting to know you and collaborating over the last year. When we first met each other, one of the main threads and themes of the discussion was professionalism. And one of the core hurdles that we talked about was kind of the maturity curve of the blockchain industry itself. And my hashtag back then was, the professionals are coming. Many of them are here. I've certainly continued to see that trend as I've scaled up the Casper Association. And I'd be curious over the last period since we've seen each other, if you've seen that or if you have any thoughts around the professionalization of the sector and what that means for scaling and widespread adoption.
We have behind us now 10 years of building blockchains without knowing what to do with them. We are still fighting about the consensus model, whereas the real problem is what are you going to do with it? Does it have usability? Is it useful? Having a blockchain alone isn't enough. You have to actually have utility. And this is also the main focus of my work, of my research, trying to identify those candidates who focus on, as you said, professional applications and usability.
Do you think that this has a little bit of kind of like the app wars that led to the death of BlackBerry?
I think the comparison is apt. I've got another one. Because I spent so much time in Taiwan working with Taiwanese computer manufacturers, Acer was the first to have a tablet. They were the first company to have a foldable computer. Long before there was an iPad, but they cared about their product. They didn't look at what you could do with the product, and that was the problem. And then Apple came in and showed them, hey, the actual technology, consumers don't care about that. The hundreds of millions of people who use phones, they don't care about which processor is in the phone or which circuit boards. This is something for the engineers and geeks. It's very much the same with blockchain. Exactly like the tech companies who didn't make it because of that. I think many blockchains won't make it because they can't focus. They don't have a focus.
So Martin, now with over 10 years of layer ones being built, people trying to solve the problem of scaling blockchains, speeding up blockchains without an actual product, there's still a lot of excitement in this space and a lot more people, a lot of smart minds coming into this space. What do you see as the killer apps that are eventually going to bring mass adoption? Is it tokenization? Is it ownership rights? Is it financial standards? Is it the creator economy with NFTs? Where do you see the bright spots, and what is it going to take to actually have true mass adoption?
I see two ways that this is going. For the most serious use cases, blockchains that need to be very reliable in the aviation industry, in government, in medicine, you're going to have to rely on providers that are completely removed from this crazy crypto space. I don't think anybody's going to trust a blockchain that is completely decentralized, where you don't even know the names or identities of half or even all of the people behind it. That is not something you can do if you run the blockchain of the healthcare system of California. These are applications where if the shit hits the fan, somebody has to go to jail. So the idea of decentralization and anonymity, that's all very well for this youth counterculture, but it's not the case for serious adoption. If I'm a government and run a blockchain, I have to be accountable for what happens on the blockchain. I can't have a hack every other week if this is my national blockchain. I think there is going to be a bifurcation where one part of the industry is going to be a playing field where there's lots of innovation, lots of fraud, lots of cybersecurity risk. And there's going to be a part of this blockchain space that is going to become very serious with a stamp of approval, audited, where there are bureaucrats or managers behind it who take the fall if things go wrong.
One of my favorite things about being able to do this is we get to talk with absolutely brilliant people from the world of Web3. One of those people is Allan Mendelowitz, who is pioneering new ways for financial institutions to use open source algorithmic cash flow logic, that's a mouthful, to prevent another banking crisis, something that many have been trying to champion. So let's listen in on what he had to say about smart financial contracts and the Actus standard. Thanks for joining us here today, Allan, here with Matt Schaffnet and myself. Appreciate the time. Maybe you can just give us a quick introduction on how you got introduced to us and a little bit about your background.
Sure. In terms of my background, I'm an economist, started out life as a professor, moved to Washington as a Brookings Institution Economic Policy Fellow, took some positions in the government, and the last position I held in government was as the chairman of the Federal Housing Finance Board, which was the regulator of the Federal Home Loan Bank System. This all took place before the collapse of 2008. But as I learned more about what the regulators were doing, I became more and more concerned that, in fact, regulators weren't collecting the best data that they could use to do their job. A lot of it was accounting, it was static, it was backwards looking, and it gave you no insight into how the condition of the business would change when the state of the world changes. And that actually was the starting point for what has become Project Actus, a not-for-profit which has created a algorithmic financial contract standard that generates the payment obligations in almost all financial contracts. And anyone who's been in the financial world knows that financial contracts are the molecular building blocks of the finance system. My firm belief that if you're going to have smart financial contracts, if you're going to have tokenization that is related to financial obligations, to add to the security and the confidence in what you're dealing with, you need to have a validated, tested way to generate the payment obligations. And so Casper, for example, is using the Actus standard as the computational core for their tokens or smart financial contracts.
I mean, Allan, what you just said really kind of spoke to me as a recovering MBS professional. For those of you that don't know MBS, that's mortgage-backed securities, but the embedded cash flow feature of what you're preaching in the standard and making those smart financial contracts really traceable would be a huge value add going forward.
And I understand, Matt, you actually were with Allan at DeFi Philly. Was it last year? And maybe you can give a little bit of background on that and how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. Allan was gracious enough to come to Philly in the beginning of July of last year to have a fireside chat with myself and speak to the DeFi Philly community. But in Philly, we touched on basically two things, right? We touched on the fact that it's our belief that the language of finance is math and can be therefore algorithmically represented and embedded in the token, making true smart financial contracts, which is huge, and not just dumb tokens, and that DeFi needs finance to advance.
One of the things we talked about was my belief that when you're dealing with the DeFi world and finance, DeFi has an opening for disruptive innovation. And it's related to the fact that the current financial world is a very high-cost operation. And when you have a high-cost operation, if somebody can come along and offer the same functionality, but do it more efficiently, you have the potential to disrupt the existing players. But that doesn't guarantee that they will succeed. And there are several issues that have to be addressed. DeFi has to be able to provide the functionality of finance, which is long-lived multi-payment obligations, a contract that covers a period of time that specifies what the borrower has to pay back and when. So that's one issue, functionality of finance. The second thing is you have to be able to do it more efficiently than the traditional institutions if you want to disrupt what they do. Most of the focus for the first decade of this whole era on things like Bitcoin and blockchain was not on finance. It was on a payment system. You could use Bitcoin and the blockchain to make payments, but payment systems are not finance. At best, it's at the fringes of finance. And the third thing is you have to be able to scale. The financial world handles millions and billions of transactions every single day. And if DeFi is to have a significant future in finance, it has to be able to efficiently scale to that level. And so a lot of thought has to go into those things if there is a major role for DeFi in finance.
Over the summer, we had the opportunity to have a very cool conversation with Michael Stoyer from Make, who was one of the early pioneers of mobile gaming. Let's listen in as he schools us on what it's like to be a blockchain and Web3 OG. Michael, thanks a lot for joining us today on the Casper podcast. Maybe if you can give the listeners just a quick background on who you are, what is Make, and your path to Casper.
So I've been on the forefront of successive generations of technology, or what we call the web, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, for about 25, somewhere between 25 and 30 years. Started in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, where I'm from, in e-commerce in the mid-90s, and quickly pivoted to mobile technology. And at the time, in the mid-90s, that meant text-based applications, right? Text ABC to 1, 2, 3 to get your horoscope for 99 cents a pop and those kinds of things. I then built the largest network of interconnected wireless carriers across Europe with over 100 mobile operators interconnected to a central platform, allowing enterprises such as McDonald's and MTV and RTL and Time Warner to interact with their customer base in a uniform way across the entire continent for the first time. So that's how I started in mobile applications. But then as networks and devices evolved, by the early 2000s, we arrived at 2G networks. It was very exciting, and 16 color screens, which was amazing. And I joined one of the top 3 video game publishers in the world at the time, a company called THQ, as their CTO for mobile. And in a joint venture with Siemens Mobile, THQ developed the first Java virtual machine for mobile devices and put the first downloadable mobile games on a cell phone. So I was really there for kicking off the mobile gaming industry and what later became the multi-trillion-dollar app economy. And then for the next 20 years, I continued to be involved in a lot of firsts across multiple industries and technologies, very much so in mobile and gaming. But let me fast forward to my involvement in blockchain. In about 2012, I was the CTO of a social and mobile gaming company in Santa Monica called Claycino. I had co-founded that several years earlier with a number of other entrepreneurs and investors. Our office sort of became the epicenter of the West Coast crypto world, and projects like Tether were literally founded in our meeting room. So I got involved in some of these projects as an advisor or investor early on, but I didn't really dive in full time until much later, when around 2017 or 2018, we sold Placino, and my business partner, Alex Kelly, and I founded Make. This is at the height of the 2017 and 2018 ICO boom, where everyone is saying blockchain is going to take over everything. In a couple of years, there won't be any banks anymore. Your mortgage company is going to get replaced by a blockchain, and next month you'll be able to track your breakfast cereal from your table all the way back to the seeds of the corn it grew from. You have to understand that I've always been a pragmatist. So we co-founded Casper Labs in 2018 to become a realistic blockchain partner to enterprises. We ended up writing a product specification that was focused on a pragmatic approach to enterprise adoption, one where blockchain comes in to augment an enterprise's existing stack in order to do what it is really uniquely good at: provides trustless verification and consensus, while leaving everything else to the components that are better suited for it. And that continues to be Casper Labs' approach today, and I continue to believe that it's on the best path to unlock a multi-trillion-dollar industry.
Yeah, Michael, I think that speaks very convincingly, first of all, to your background and your understanding of this space. Where does your thought process go in terms of multi-chain ecosystems, the unique advantages, or your commitment to open sourcing code for Casper, for example, and where do you see things going as a pragmatist in this space that others are overlooking?
At Make, and I know at Casper broadly as well, we're big believers in open source. Make is probably one of the top, if not the top, contributor of open source code in the Casper ecosystem, next to obviously Casper Labs. In the last 2 to 3 years, we have open sourced somewhere between 20 and 30 projects for Casper.
What is the value of open source to you? Can you kind of just expand on that, the importance of why open source, first of all?
Sure. So I was first exposed to open source myself in the late 90s when I became a very, very small contributor to a project called Curl. I saw the power of people from all over the world contributing their time, their effort, their knowledge, and working for a common good and a common outcome. But in the crypto space, Casper, I know, has taken a sort of maximally open approach to development and open sourcing of its code, as well as its governance, right? It's completely permissionless. Anybody can start up a validator. It's not some council that gets to decide who runs the network. The network is run by the community. And that's a commitment that I believe it has made in perpetuity. That is something that we can all take collective ownership of and collective pride in and work for common good on together.
Wow, that's a really great point, Michael. And I think that we are taking the right steps in that. And it's definitely a transitional, evolving process. You know, one thing that you said at the beginning about e-commerce was okay, you've gone through several iterations. So the first part of the question is, how is that relative to where we are in blockchain as we go across that maturity curve? So that's part one. Part two, as you look at that evolution, and you struck it on the head when you said, Casper is uncompromisingly permissionless. Do you believe also that the permissionless open source blockchain is the path to the corporate ecosystem because it's kind of what proves out that thesis?
Obviously, blockchain as a technology is still very much in the process of finding its mass adoption, right? The market for blockchain-enabled applications is probably measured in the hundreds of millions, not in the billions yet. So how do we get to true mass adoption? So I think there are two paths to that. One is clearly through enterprise, right? Onboarding, for example, a single wireless carrier with 100 million subscribers will open more wallets than almost any other project to date in our industry. That is clearly the strategy that Casper Labs as a company is pursuing. And then there is mass adoption on sort of a product and consumer front. And I think there's a lot that we've learned over the last 25 plus years, whether it's e-commerce or the whole evolution of mobile gaming. And there's a lot that happened between then and now. So I very much believe that intuitive and user-friendly user experience is extremely important. The tech that you're looking for mass adoption for, it has to be easier to use than the tech that it's trying to supersede, or else it will fail. The example is iPhone became dominant. They were the first smartphones, right? We had Symbian OS before them, Palm OS, BlackBerry OS. They all failed because of basically poor user experience. Then I think it's very important that you have a way of ensuring repeat engagement. Everybody uses email and instant messaging and social because it keeps pulling you back in. It's way too easy to try a crypto project and never come back. This is how wallets end up on landfills, right? People don't remember they interacted with something and it's a one and done experience. And we are introducing at Make a number of tools to enable this for developers, including things like in-app notifications that any dApp developer can leverage going forward.
Meta Parlikar is the CTO at Casper Labs and an all-around rock star and absolutely qualified to speak to the technical innovations taking place at Casper and what's in store as Casper continues to make big improvements to the network. So let's listen in as she explains why Casper is uniquely positioned to make big waves. Meta Parlikar, thank you so much for joining us today on the Casper podcast. You are the CTO of Casper Labs. And just to clarify for our audience, how would you describe your role as a CTO, and is that evolving as blockchain evolves? And what does it mean for you day to day at Casper Labs?
Oh, yeah. So, gosh, it's definitely evolving for me. If you think about being a chief technical officer in the blockchain space, you'll see a wide variety of profiles and a lot of different types of personalities in the CTO space, or if you want to call them lead architects or visionaries. They do have personalities for sure. Some of them are very much researchers, PhDs, mathematicians. They focus a lot on the consensus mechanisms. That's their area of focus and expertise. I would say for me, I was never that type of persona. I was never that type of personality. And today I still am not. While I do have, a lot of exposure to consensus mechanisms and I understand their purpose and the problems that they solve, I'm much more product focused CTO. I've always been, right? My focus has always been on what kind of value can we deliver to the customer so that it solves a business problem. And when we came up with the feature set for the Casper protocol, we started with that very foundational belief that there needed to be a public blockchain or a technology that's purpose-built for the enterprise. And what that means is that the protocol gives you certain guarantees. It enforces certain things that are separate from what you can build in the smart contract container or the smart contract layer on the blockchain. There are certain things that the Casper protocol does natively that we feel are extremely important because it gives additional transparency and guarantees to the users of the Casper technology around this is what the protocol is enforcing. These are the security guarantees the protocol is giving you about accounts over contract versioning. We feel that that is very essential. Again, that comes from a real product focus. The customer we built the Casper protocol for was ultimately me, coming from enterprise software engineering, where I had to build products for enterprises. I know what kind of technology it takes to run in that data center, what the requirements are to build a product around a blockchain.
Amazing. Tons of nuance that I think people don't quite, have deep insights into. And it's great to hear how you're approaching that role at Casper Labs and as you're building out the protocol itself. I mean, blockchain technology is evolving constantly. Where do you see the evolution of blockchain over the next 5 years? And how does that fit into the milestones at Casper?
When we started Casper Labs and set out to build the Casper technology, no one was really thinking about enterprise. Everybody in the space was really looking at disrupting the status quo, decentralizing everything. And now people are coming around to realize that the broad adoption of any technology requires the enterprise to lead the charge. And even those startups that are disruptive at that time ultimately become those large companies that enable access of the technology to the masses. I believe that consensus protocols will ultimately become commoditized. There will be a few high-performing consensus protocols that majority of the blockchains will use, once they've stood the test of time. The Casper technology has pluggable consensus. It's the only protocol that actually has two consensus protocols implemented in it and accessible to operate within it. So you can run Casper today either using Highway Consensus or Zug Consensus. Both of them are novel protocols, and they're both PBFT Casper variants. but they are both available. You can run Casper in either format. Zug is slated to be part of 2.0. That's when we recommend that Casper mainnet would switch over to Zug consensus from Highway consensus, but Highway consensus isn't going anywhere. And if the validators decide they want to revert back to Highway consensus, they can choose to do that. And the reason for that is because I believe that consensus protocols will ultimately become commoditized. Fast forward 10 or 15 years from now, I don't believe you're going to see a whole bunch of different consensus protocols in the market. Consensus protocols are not valuable to the end user. Nobody cares about consensus. There's a lot of focus on it in the blockchain space because it's academically intriguing and interesting, and it's an area of research, and you see a lot of researchers in the blockchain space. But if you ask any enterprise person, they don't care about consensus.
No, I think these are excellent points, Meta. Casper's focused on the enterprise, and that means that we're building robust technology that can scale.
Ralph Kubley from the Casper Association is passionate about smart financial contracts and the future of tokenizing real-world assets and what that actually means. He was kind enough to take time out of his schedule and join us on the show a while back to explain his unique perspective on the future of tokenization.
I was wondering if you think the amalgamation of the many antiquated tech stacks in the money center banking system that have accumulated over the last 75 to 100 years in the mass consolidation of the system will at some point reach inflection point at which the cost benefit of deferring your switch over to a new tech stack, right? Will that reach an inflection point, do you think, because you've been in the side of many of these financial institutions, that we're getting closer to that?
That's an interesting point. Many of these systems reach their end of life, and quite frankly, the industry has thought since 2017 that tokenization is a great way out of this mess, but it's not without a proper consideration of what is represented by a token. This is the problem of blockchain and finance currently, that many actors do not consider carefully enough what the token is representing, and this is going to be an issue if it's not defined as a financial contract.
Back in September, had the privilege to travel to Token 2049 in Singapore with the Casper Association for one of the world's biggest blockchain summits. Here, we're going to recap a conversation that we had with Aaron and Austin from Altcoin Daily as they talked to us about a new reality show they're producing all about Web3, Shark Tank meets crypto.
Hey, my name is Aaron, producer of Killer Whales and judge on the show, premiering January 2024 at Token 2049. This is my first time here. Me and my brother are here today. And this is an awesome event, one of the best events I've been to in Asia. Now, Killer Whales is what I'm really excited about. You need to see the trailer. You need to watch it in January. You know, what I like about the show and why I was happy to sign on and do it is kind of the same reason that the original Shark Tank people signed on for Shark Tank. They started that show right after the 2008 financial crisis. They wanted to show that they're, you can be entrepreneurs and make something, a great business in America. And, something that was important to me, I've been in crypto full time since the very beginning of 2018 when we started our YouTube channel, Altcoin Daily. I started from zero, 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube now, and we're in a bear market. And something we wanted to do was show people that there are legitimate projects in the crypto space. There are good ones, there are bad ones, but let's highlight the good ones. And, let's talk to some of the ones that maybe have room for improvement and say, you know what, this is what I think is good about the project. This is what I think would be good to work on. I think, the show is for everybody, not just cryptocurrency people. Every single person, mom, grandma, little Jeffrey can watch the show, and I think it's going to be really good.
Austin, you're also a judge on the show. Why did you want to do this project?
Why I see so much potential in this show is because just like the OG Shark Tank back in the day, which I was a huge fan of, where you didn't necessarily have to be an expert about investing to watch it, but you could learn along the way as all these legit investors would talk and evaluate the projects. I'm excited to do the exact same thing with crypto in our new show and expose the world to this new technological revolution, which is not going away, but, expose them and have them learn along the way with us. It's going to be awesome.
And finally, perhaps one of my favorite episodes from 2023 was the NFT.NYC episode. I have personally been attending NFT NYC every year for the past 3 or 4 years, and this one was special. As we're getting off the escalator on the second floor of this massive Javits Center, I see a well-known NFT rapper.
Blockchain, I'm blocking on my iPhone. Got rich from flipping it all on my own.
Hey, Joe from Casper Dill. Can you introduce yourself to the podcast listeners?
Yeah, what's up? I'm Dill. I'm a multi-platinum recording artist from Philly, and I've been doing music NFTs for over 2 years.
When you tell people about music NFTs, what's the takeaway?
I think the first thing people need to understand is that the music industry is broken and that artists are not fairly compensated for their work, especially with the major labels. And so NFTs allows the artists to go directly to their fans, directly to their consumers, without needing to go through that major label.
Okay. And what is your experience so far right now? Tell us what you're doing, what you're working on.
NFTs have changed my life as a musician. I worked with major labels for years. I've been in the music industry almost a decade. I have a multi-platinum hit song, and I experienced a label taking most of my money and not reinvesting in us. So with music NFTs, in the last 2 years, I've actually made as much revenue as I did in almost a decade with a multi-platinum hit song. And that's all from direct support of the community. So the music itself still has a long way to go. But what we're doing here is we're able to monetize it up front a lot more quickly. So it's very exciting.
What are you looking to do, take away here at NFT NYC?
My goal, this is my third NFT NYC. My goal every time has just been to spread more information and knowledge about music NFTs. Because right now, not enough people know about them. I still think that a small percentage of all NFT collectors actually hold a music NFT or know about music NFTs. So we need greater market penetration within Web3.
So there you have it, just a small sampling of some of our favorite conversations over the past year. And if you'd like to hear the full episodes, you can find those on Spotify or Apple Music. They're also on Amazon Music, and there's a link on our website at casper.network. So from Matt and myself and all of us at the Casper Association, thank you for taking this journey with us, and we'd like to wish you a very happy and productive new year in 2024. And we look forward to picking up right where we left off. Until next time, Happy New Year, and we'll see you on the other side.